What lies beneath the dark subconscious of a faceless, silent killer? What is present behind the black eyes of what was just a 6-year-old child on Halloween night in 1963? One psychiatric doctor by the name of Sam Loomis was prepared to find out what goes bump in the night within the mind of Haddonfield, Illinois' boogeyman Michael Myers. To learn the fate of Dr. Loomis's fiancé and how it might have changed his entire life going forward, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Horror History. In today's lesson, I am analyzing the man who tried to understand an incomprehensible evil. There are many versions of this character because there are many alternate timelines in the Halloween story. I like to think of the timeline like a train map, the Halloween Express. Today I'll just be analyzing the original timeline where Dr. Loomis is portrayed by actor Donald Pleasence. There may be other videos where we ride the Halloween Express down alternate routes. If you want to make things more complicated, there is a theory that the character Sam Loomis in Psycho is the very same Sam Loomis as the one in the Halloween series. Sam Loomis in Psycho follows a private investigator to find his missing girlfriend, Marion Crane. But before Sam can find her, she's already dead alongside the private investigator. This theory says that Sam was driven to the obsession of learning how the criminal mind works, which leads him to take the job at Smithsgrove Sanitarium where he meets Michael. As much fun as that idea is, personally, I think Halloween's Sam Loomis was just named after Psycho's Sam Loomis because director John Carpenter was paying homage to a great movie that inspired the slasher genre. In order for me to turn Dr. Loomis's psychoanalysis back at him, I'm gonna take it back to his first appearance in the franchise. Dr. Samuel Loomis began his psychological studies of the feared Michael Myers on November 5th, 1963, when Michael was admitted to Smithsgrove Sanitarium. Michael was silent and unmoving after the murder of his sister, Judith Myers. Dr. Loomis seemed to think that he was experiencing severe trauma and damage to his psychological health. He opted for specialized treatment to try to penetrate through Michael's unwavering lack of emotional response. The early months of Loomis's care for Michael are mostly a mystery because this time period is never covered in the Halloween canon. However, if we look at the non-canon Chaos Comics material, we can get a little bit more backstory. This is one of those cases where the comic doesn't contradict anything in the movies, and it can potentially help us understand Loomis a little bit better, so I'm kind of okay with talking about it as long as we remember that this technically doesn't count. Loomis requested his supervisor, Dr. Carpenter, to move Michael into a private room safely away from the other juveniles of the building, but Dr. Carpenter declined Loomis's request and kept Michael where he was with the other juveniles. There was one other doctor at the sanitarium that saw Michael the same way that Loomis did, a woman by the name of Jennifer Hill. He asked her to speak with Dr. Carpenter with him in order to convince him that Michael needed to be moved. Dr. Hill did agree to do this under the condition that Loomis take her out to dinner, and although their attempt to get Michael moved to solitary was not successful, Dr. Hill's attempt at romance was, and the two started dating, bonding over their shared beliefs about psychotherapy. Over the next few months, a few incidents took place with the other juveniles at the facility, like Michael shoving a crayon deep into the fellow patient Tony O'Malley's left eye. This was before security cameras were common, so Loomis and the Smithsgrove staff could not find any evidence that Michael was responsible and ended up blaming another child. In November, a child by the name of Adrian Wade ate an entire birthday cake that was supposed to be given to Michael. Shortly after, Adrian was found in the shower room with second-degree burns all over his body. He later died in the hospital of heart failure. After months of further study of Michael and his psychological health, Dr. Loomis started to believe that the young Myers boy did not suffer from trauma that occurred on Halloween 1963, but found that behind his eyes leaked only darkness. He had no conscience, no remorse, no response to the perception of life, death, consequence, or right and wrong, only a psyche of pure evil.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
On May 1st, 1964, only months after Michael was admitted to Smithsgrove Sanitarium, Loomis met with 2 of the lead doctors at the facility to try to move Michael to a maximum security ward in Litchfield, Illinois. The 2 doctors refused Loomis's suggestion, stating that Michael was in a state of comatose and did not react to anything in his surroundings. But Loomis did not agree. Loomis believed that Michael was using this state of mind to cover up his true dark behaviors, and insisted he be moved somewhere else where it would be impossible for him to escape. The doctors then gave Loomis a choice. Either Loomis would continue working with Michael at Smithsgrove, or someone else would be assigned to the patient. Loomis reluctantly agreed to the doctor's terms because he felt that no one else could be trusted to work with him. It makes me wonder if things could have gone differently if another doctor had worked closely with Michael. It seems like one of the main issues was that most of the other doctors didn't believe that such a young boy could be so full of evil. So it might have benefited Loomis to have someone else see the patient from his perspective. The only one who really kind of understood the danger that Michael posed was his girlfriend, Dr. Hill. As the two continued to get closer, they were eventually engaged, with a wedding planned for December 1971. However, disaster would strike strike before the big day would come. In October 1971, Dr. Carpenter threw a Halloween party at the Sanitarium, which Loomis was heavily in opposition of. That night, the electricity went out, and a girl by the name of Nancy was found dead, drowned during a game of bobbing for apples. The same night, Dr. Hill was found dead outside of the Sanitarium. Her death was ruled a suicide because it seemed that she either fell out or jumped off the roof of the building. But Loomis knew better. He knew in his gut that Jennifer would not kill herself, and he couldn't see a scenario that didn't involve Michael getting his hands dirty. I think this was really the last straw for him. Jennifer was the one person that Loomis could connect to, not only in terms of his personal life, but also at work. She was the only other person who could see Michael's true nature. I think this must be when he snapped and made it his life's goal to suppress the evil lurking inside of the Sanitarium. For the next 7 years, he did his best to keep Michael locked away from society, and this strategy worked until the night of October 30th, 1978, where Michael escaped from captivity to bring evil upon Haddonfield once again. Loomis and his assistant, Nurse Marion Chambers, were given the assignment of transporting Michael from Smiths Grove Sanitarium to his home county of Livingston for trial. The week prior, Michael had turned 21 and was due in court to see if he was fit to be released. On the drive up to Smiths Grove, Loomis continually refers to Michael as it, which Marion catches on to.
Don't you think we could refer to it as him?
If you say so.
Here, Loomis shows that he no longer sees Michael as a human, but as an embodiment of pure evil. He suggests that Marion should give Michael a dose of Thorazine, which is a strong drug used to control psychotic disorders, causing her to realize that Loomis doesn't want Michael to have any chance of winning his trial. As they get closer to the facility, they notice several of the patients wandering the grounds, which strikes dread into him because he fears that Michael may have escaped. He runs up to the gates to use the telephone, trying to warn the staff, when Michael jumps on the roof of the car and grabs Marion through the window. Loomis is unable to stop Michael as he chases Marion out of the car, gets inside, and frantically drives away. Strangely, Loomis doesn't seem that shocked at Michael's ability to operate a car, even though he'd been locked up since age 6 and probably had never even been in a car over the last 15 years. His response all ties back to the idea that Michael is no man, but rather just an incarnation of evil itself. We're just seeing how desensitized he has become to it. In fact, he already knows Michael is on his way back to Haddonfield for Halloween and drives in that direction. On his way, he discovers Michael's medical gown and the matchbook that Marion had used the night before, so he knows he's on the right track. He decides to investigate the gravesite of Judith Myers, only to find her headstone has been removed, confirming his suspicion that Michael has come home. After enlisting the help of the local sheriff, Lee Brackett, the two check out Michael's old residence at 45 Lambkin Lane, which has been broken into. The two discover Michael's first confirmed victim of the evening, a dog they found in the house. See, I can kind of disagree but sympathize with Michael wanting to take out humans, but a dog? That's just messed up, man. Loomis convinces Sheriff Brackett that Michael is probably nearby and needs to be captured. It's here that we see that despite his bravery to try to spot Michael, Loomis is terrified of Haddonfield's so-called boogeyman and the capabilities that he possesses. Loomis eventually discovers the stolen sanitarium vehicle from the night before across the street. He walks the streets of Haddonfield until later that evening, he sees two young kids running out of a house screaming. Loomis is able to recognize their screams as true terror, as opposed to an innocent Halloween prank. And he runs into the house to find 17-year-old Laurie Strode being strangled by Michael. Laurie manages to pull Michael's mask off for a moment, giving Loomis time to shoot him. How many times, Dr. Loomis?
I shot him 6 times!
Which sends Michael over the balcony railing onto the lawn. By the time Loomis tends to Laurie and looks over the balcony, his former patient is no longer there. Michael had vanished, and we can visibly see how shaken up Dr. Loomis is by the realization that his nemesis isn't just evil, inhuman, and possibly the devil incarnate, but also invincible. Loomis looks out into the world, wondering where Michael has gone next. The next door neighbor comes out and helps Loomis get a hold of the police, so the search continues, leading to this incident. Sheriff Brackett asks if this victim is Michael, but before they find out, Brackett is informed that his teenage daughter Annie was found dead. Sheriff Brackett identified the body and set off to tell his wife of the circumstances, which he blames on Loomis. That's gotta be crushing for Dr. Loomis. He tried to warn the psychiatric hospital how dangerous Michael was for 15 years. Then he got away, Dr. Loomis's worst nightmares came true despite his best efforts, and after all of that, he still shoulders the brunt of the blame. That kind of treatment just makes a guy go, Deputy Hunt would fill in for Brackett from that point forward. Hunt believes that the crash victim is Michael, which may have just been wishful thinking because Loomis is not convinced. The dentist at the coroner's office estimated the burned body from his teeth to be about 17 years old, although a full check of dental records would take hours to complete. I think some part of Loomis knows that Michael is still on the loose, so he convinced Deputy Hunt to a further patrol of the town. Loomis directs him back to the Myers house, thinking that maybe if Michael is injured, the familiarity of his old home could give him security in his vulnerable state. The house is already being swept by police, while local townsfolk mob outside and vandalize the place as some kind of weird post-tragedy form of protest. It's there that a pair of high school boys express concern to Deputy Hunt because their friend Bennett Tramer didn't get home after leaving a costume party. Hunt and Loomis both suspect the worst, that the burned body belonged to Tramer, meaning that Myers must still be out there. Before being able to really put together a plan, they're called to Haddonfield Elementary School, where another break-in has taken place, possibly their chance to catch Michael. They discover a child's picture of a family, decorated with a knife that Michael has left piercing the daughter's heart. On the chalkboard, the word Samhain is written in red, and Loomis is the only one that knows its Celtic origins. It's essentially an ancient Gaelic festival of the dead, celebrating the end of summer and the beginning of winter, which began on what we now know as Halloween night. They're interrupted by Nurse Chambers, who informs Dr. Loomis that the governor has ordered him to leave Haddonfield under the belief that he's contributing to the hysteria. Loomis at first refuses. He desperately wants to find and stop Michael. This is where we really see his behavior cross over from concerned into obsessive. Michael Myers had essentially become his life's work, and he didn't have anything or anyone else to go back to. He was ready to try to stop Michael no matter the cost. However, there was already a state marshal waiting outside, so Loomis had no choice but to be escorted by him and Marion. I mean, I never understood why he doesn't just try to sneak out the back. I guess he just knows that medicine is his thing and stealth is not. However, once in the police car, he learns of a secret government sealed document, which would change everything he thought he knew about Michael's rampage. On the car ride back into Smith's Grove, Marion drops this bomb on Dr. Loomis.
There's a file on Michael Myers that nobody knew about.
I've seen everything.
No, it was hidden, sealed by the court after his parents were killed. Now, after the governor heard what happened tonight, he authorized Dr. Rogers to open it. That girl, that Strode girl, that's Michael Myers' sister.
Loomis has the revelation that Michael is in Haddonfield to finish what he started 15 years ago by taking out the other sister. So he pleads with the marshal to take him to the hospital where Laurie's being kept, but to no avail. So in a fit of desperation, he grabs his revolver and to show that he's serious, fires a shot through the passenger window and demands to be taken to the hospital. You can't just do that. I mean, where does he think he is? LA County? Loomis's desperation is starting to get the better of him. By threatening an officer of the law at gunpoint, he's basically declaring that he'll try to stop the boogeyman of Haddonfield even if it means destroying himself. Dr. Samuel Loomis turned from a by-the-book concerned psychiatrist to a man overcome with obsession. I might normally compare his behavior against a medically recognized disorder, as I have for some other characters that I've analyzed, but as far as I can tell, he doesn't really have a disorder. He's just obsessed with stopping Michael, and given what he's been through, it's not impossible to blame him. I think about every group project ever. Loomis has tried to convince others and work with others to prevent a disaster, but eventually they all let him down, and he's got to do it himself, even if this leads him down a dark road of aggression and even committing crimes. It's probably a good thing too, because he arrives at Haddonfield Hospital just in time to save Laurie from Michael's wrath. The state marshal is not so lucky.
No!
I guess Loomis is off the hook? But also, no, because he's once again face to face with Michael, and Michael is invincible. He and Laurie run to try to take cover in an operating room, but Michael easily tears through the door and stabs his doctor in the stomach before turning his rage against Laurie, who managed to get a hold of Loomis's revolver and shoot Michael in the eyes to temporarily blind him. Meanwhile, Loomis realizes it's gonna take something more than bullets, or like a cleverly placed trail of Reese's Pieces, to stop Michael, and devises a plan to trap him by opening the compressed gas canisters in the room before saying this.
It's time, Michael.
And after giving Laurie a moment to run for it, he lights the place up, potentially sacrificing himself to put a stop to the evil that inhabits the mind of his patients. On the morning of November 1st, the ambos roll. That means ambulances came. My mom heard it on a medical show once and thought it was hilarious, so I'm just gonna go with it. Somehow, by some miracle, Dr. Sam Loomis survived the massive explosion at Haddonfield Hospital and the seemingly fatal stab to his abdomen. He would live on with major burn scars on his face and walk with a limp, needing to use a cane for the rest of his life. Not too bad for being blown up as a 60-year-old man, right? Those must have been some real fast ambos. However, as expected, Michael isn't entirely out of the picture yet either, but he does go into a coma, allowing him to be captured and placed back into a psychiatric facility. Despite Michael spending the next 10 years in a coma, Loomis is still obsessed and still fears the evil that lurks within him. His new life's work is to prevent anyone from living through the Halloween night that he and Laurie escaped. As more time passes, Michael is seen as less and less of a threat by his peers. Only he and Laurie know that one day Michael will rise again. And then it's just him, because Laurie passes away in 1987, leaving behind a daughter named Jamie. A year after her death, Loomis is still fighting just as hard to keep Michael locked up. The staff actually go behind his back to transfer Michael from the high security facility he's at, Ridgemont Federal Sanitarium, back to Smith's Grove on October 30th, 1988. Loomis immediately goes in to object when he finds out, and to his horror, learns of an accident that occurred during the patient transport. Without another word, he storms out of the room to find his patient once again and prevent a repeat of what happened 10 years earlier to this day. This time, he suspects Michael will be coming after Laurie Strode's daughter, Jamie Lloyd, the closest living relative. When Loomis sees the accident site, he's not too convinced that it was an accident, and heads back to Haddonfield for another round of serial killer hide and seek.
Hide and seek? Are we really gonna play that?
No, not you. Go away. Loomis stops at a gas station, but upon further investigation, he finds more than he was expecting. For one, if you thought Loomis was obsessed with Michael, get a load of this gas station diner owner. I think he's even more obsessed with regular Abraham Lincoln. Loomis finds the owner tied up in metal chains and some woman on the floor who also bit the dust. He tries to dial out for help, but to his surprise, all of the phones had been broken. To be fair, Michael's not going to use them, he doesn't talk, but the biggest surprise for Loomis is behind him. No, I mean the other direction. He turns and finds Michael standing in the kitchen, just staring at him. Loomis pleads with him not to return to Haddonfield.
If you want another victim, take me. But leave those people in peace.
With no response, Loomis shoots off 4 rounds from his gun, but it's no good. Michael vanishes. Loomis runs outside to find him when a truck smashes through the garage doors. Loomis shoots off 4 more rounds to no avail. Michael intentionally sideswipes the gas pump, and the explosion blows up Loomis's car in the process. I always love how if you look closely at the car, it just jumps off the ground. Dr. Sam probably didn't find it so funny though. He's now stranded without a way of catching up to Michael and the hell that he's about to unleash on Haddonfield. Loomis walks down the lonely road and after being punked by some kids is picked up by Reverend Jackson Sayre, who tells him that you can't kill evil.
You don't die like a man dies.
Loomis understands this all too well. He's been living with the consequences of that since 1978. Sayre drops him at the Haddonfield police station and he warns the new sheriff, Ben Meeker. Just like practically everyone, Meeker doesn't believe him at first. Imagine if people just listen to doctors when they warn about dangerous things. After some debate, the sheriff reluctantly declares a state of emergency and all of Haddonfield's citizens are told to lock down inside of their homes. Imagine if they actually listened. Dr. Loomis probably thinks about Michael's attack pattern 10 years ago to make his next move. In '78, Michael went to his childhood home to try to find his sister Laurie. So this time, Loomis suspects that he'll go to the adoptive home of his niece, Jamie. There, he finds pictures of Laurie scattered on the floor and the family dog. Loomis is too late, but he does learn that Michael is indeed repeating his 1978 rampage. Loomis and Meeker search the town and find Jamie trick-or-treating with her adoptive sister Rachel. They're picked up and put in the squad car, but find themselves immediately surrounded by the very thing they were supposed to be protected from.
Dear God.
After discovering that some pranksters in town were doing a little Michael Myers cosplay and nearly shooting them, Loomis and Sheriff Meeker returned to the police station to find it completely destroyed, with Michael also having demoted one of the deputies to Halloween decoration, if you know what I mean. A good old group of Illinois boys show up at the police station demanding to know what was going on in Haddonfield. Loomis tells them that Michael has returned, which Meeker isn't happy with, claiming that he just created a lynch mob. However, Loomis seems undisturbed by this accusation.
You haven't got a police force! These men may be the only defense you've got.
Being the only adult alive that has witnessed the sheer horror that is Michael, it seems that he's willing to just take whatever help he can get. He obviously did not realize that cops do it by the book. I have no idea what that means still. They bring Jamie and Rachel to the only safe place they have left, Sheriff Meeker's home, where with the help of Deputy Logan, they arm themselves and board the place up. Satisfied with Jamie's safety, Loomis goes back on the offensive and tries to return to Jamie's house to find Michael. He doesn't find him, but he does, later that night, run back into Jamie as she is running from him, and decides to take her to the schoolhouse for safety. The school may have actually been considered safe back then, I don't know. But I guess this school would be considered an exception, because Michael is already there waiting for them, and throws Loomis through a glass door. Loomis is pretty metal. I mean, he's been stabbed, blown up, and now thrown through a door. Seems like he's just as hard to kill as Michael is. Loomis is present later on when the police and the Illinois boys all shoot Michael down at once, sending him into a well, and interestingly, he seems to believe that Michael is actually dead this time, despite years of evidence that Michael's death is simply not a possibility.
Michael Myers is in hell. Buried. where he belongs.
It seems out of character for Loomis to be that naive, doesn't it? My take is that he was about 70 at this point, and he probably didn't think he'd be around if Michael came back after another 10 years or so. Almost like he needed to believe that Michael was dead so he could die in peace. Obviously, the real reason is that director Dwight Little didn't really want to make another Halloween movie, but this is a video about Loomis, not Dwight Little. Dr. Loomis returns home with Jamie and her family to help them settle back in, but after hearing a chilling scream, Loomis rushes to the stairway to find Jamie holding a pair of scissors. Loomis cannot believe what he sees. The evil he spent the last 25 years trying to vanquish is now logged into the body of the one girl that he was able to save. To put this in perspective, this is like playing a whole game, but then your file gets deleted at 99%. Loomis's psyche begins to break. The terror of the idea that the evil had just latched onto another soul is too much for him to bear, and he raises his gun to shoot, but not before being stopped by Sheriff Meeker. However, the circumstances are not quite as bad as they first seemed. Over the next year, Jamie seems to get control of the evil connection she now has. She is now the newest patient of Dr. Loomis, but she doesn't become an empty, soulless shape like Michael had. She does, however, go mute due to the trauma of the year before, and suffers from what seem to be terrors and seizures in the night, but Loomis seems to know that there's more to it than that. For his own sake, it's probably a good thing that he's able to work with Jamie, because he now has something to live for again. But because he's so jaded now, it often comes off as kind of scary for her. Loomis comes and checks on Jamie one day during her stay at the facility while Rachel and her friends Tina are visiting. A brick smashes through the window with a note attached reading, "The evil child must die." Loomis believes the people of Haddonfield are afraid of Jamie because they think that she's following in Michael's footsteps. On October 31st, 1989, 1 year into his care for her, Jamie drew something that caught Loomis's attention, a horrific drawing of the family dog, Max. I would not want to be a dog in Haddonfield in late October. Loomis called the family's home to check on Max because he had discovered that Jamie could sense things. He aggressively demanded that she write down whatever she knew.
Right!
For me, this is the point of no return for Loomis. He has good intentions, but he doesn't treat Jamie with the same patience that he gave Michael early on. Jamie soon suffers another seizure, which convinces Loomis that she's mentally linked to Michael. He tells Sheriff Meeker about how he believes that Michael is still alive.
Hell would not have him.
But the sheriff is called away to the cemetery, and so Loomis returns to try to get more answers out of Jamie.
What about your stepmother, Jamie?
Harry, did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
He then tells Jamie of his trip to the cemetery, where supposedly someone had dug up the coffin of a 9-year-old girl.
What do you think he's going to do with that?
Whoa, man. He also tries searching the Myers house again, but honestly, what is he gonna do to him at this point? He shot him several times, blew him up, loaded him with bullets again, and yet Michael still lives on. For these reasons, I don't think he was there to find Michael. I think he was there to set a trap, which would come into play later that Halloween night. Dr. Loomis decides to stay by Jamie's side that evening as she attends her school's costume party. It's here that she has another vision, thanks to her connection with her uncle, which helps them figure out that Tina Williams was in danger near Dale's gas station across town, and Loomis gets Sheriff Meeker on the phone to help save her. Tina returns to the clinic to comfort Jamie for a short period of time, but decides to attend a Halloween party later that evening. Loomis begs her to stay, thinking that she's still going to be in danger, but Tina doesn't believe him and blames him for filling Jamie's head with all of these boogeyman stories. The interaction shows that he's become seen by the younger people in town as more of a crazy old man than an experienced Michael Myers veteran and survivor. Loomis instructs the local police to follow her. However, Jamie sees that Tina is going to be in danger again and sneaks out to try to warn her herself.
Jamie's not in her room. She's nowhere in sight.
Loomis, what the hell are you doing?
My thoughts exactly. The guy is just out of control. However, he still keeps finding ways to be helpful, as he helps the police find Jamie, who had escaped with her classmate Billy Hill near an old barn. They were not in time to save Tina, but Jamie and Billy are escorted to safety. Jamie is gaining some of her voice back, and she asks if Loomis will be able to kill Michael, to which he replies,
I think so.
For some reason, even though nothing in this 26-year span should lead him to believe that Michael is mortal. On the bright side for them, this causes Jamie to agree to help Loomis and the police by using her visions to help locate and catch Michael. As the ambos and police officers leave the scene, Loomis approaches the edge of the forest and yells into the trees at Michael, claiming that his rage will destroy him someday, that killing everyone will not make it go away. He instructs Michael to go home, where Loomis and Jamie will be waiting for him. Sure enough, they set up Jamie and Judith's old room as the police surround the house and wait for Haddonfield's silent killer to approach. Loomis is waiting in the hall when he's called into the room because Jamie's having another one of her psychic connection episodes. This time it appears that Billy is the one in danger, though I guess you could argue that this was all a diversion based on what happens next. Loomis radios the sheriff and tells him that Michael is at the children's clinic, so Meeker sends all of his officers there, leaving the outside of the house unguarded. It seems like this was Loomis's plan all along. It could be that he figures Michael will not show up if the police are all around, or maybe he thought that with fewer people there'll be fewer casualties. Plus, this kind of allows him to operate the way that he wants to, which, as we'll see shortly, is probably not something that anyone on the police force would have approved of. He tells the one remaining officer to stay with Jamie as he descends towards the main level of the house where Michael is coming in, and they meet face to face once again. Knowing he's here for Jamie, Loomis informs him that he believes Jamie can stop the rage inside of him. He reminds him of how he used to be before the rage engulfed him. He's trying to break through to Michael on a more human level, a side of him that the doctor had long thought to be dead. Why does he suddenly think he can reach some semblance of humanity buried inside of his former patients? It's because of Jamie. Jamie was supposedly overcome by the same evil that affected Michael, but she was able to overcome it and go back to being a good person. He tries to take Michael's knife away from him gently, until Michael cuts him across the stomach and throws him through a railing. Michael follows the sound of Jamie and the officer upstairs trying to escape, and after Jamie is almost killed by Michael about 100 times, she runs back downstairs and finds Loomis there to comfort her. But things take a turn for the worse. Instead of running away like normal people, Loomis decides to lure and taunt Michael with Jamie, using her as bait at the end of the stairs.
You want her? Here she is!
This is almost definitely the worst thing that he's ever done, because judging by her reaction, Jamie had no idea that she was going to be used as bait like this in such a close encounter with her masked stalker.
This is the face of the clinically insane. If you see this man, do not engage him.
Let's play a game.
Yep, he's officially crossed into Jigsaw territory now.
Catch the little girl.
Okay, so he's not actually giving her up to him, at least. I guess that's slightly redeeming. When Michael reaches the middle of the room, Loomis pulls a rope, releasing a net made with heavy chains. He also loads him up with darts from a tranquilizer gun, and in a moment of madness, just savagely beats him with this wooden board. Not sure that's gonna do a lot, but it probably felt good.
I know where I was for a minute. It felt good though.
The police show up and place Michael in holding, which is glossed over, but it's a huge milestone for Loomis. People are finally seeing Michael the way that he sees him, and they're willing to put him in an actual jail rather than dumping him in another psychiatric facility. The plan is to transfer him to a maximum security facility where he would stay until death, or in his case, just forever. Unfortunately for Haddonfield and its police force, forever ends up not even being more than a night, because a mysterious character in a black trench coat shows up, takes out the entire police station, and frees Michael Myers. I compared Dr. Loomis to Jigsaw earlier, so I guess this guy is Hoffman.
Game over.
Michael was free to exercise his immortality against the people of Haddonfield once more, but Dr. Loomis's health would finally get the better of him, as he suffered a stroke not long after. I imagine that Halloween in 1989 was the biggest roller coaster that Samuel Loomis ever went through. He had finally found Michael, captured him, only for him to be released by another powerful evildoer. Based on the information we have, Loomis suffered his stroke sometime after this, but I like to imagine that it was the same night. Right when he found out that Michael had escaped, his brain basically freaked out, and he ends up realizing that he can't go on like this anymore. For the better of his health, he retired from his position at Smith's Grove Sanitarium and moved to a secluded lifestyle in a cabin in rural Illinois. He also got surgery to remove the burn scars from his face. Everything was peaceful for the next 6 years, until he got a visit from an old friend on October 30th, 1995. His old boss, Dr. Terence Wynn, comes in to see him on that dark, rainy night. Wynn had come to celebrate his own retirement and wants to convince Loomis to go back as chief administrator of Smith's Grove. It's during this discussion that Loomis recognizes a familiar voice on the radio calling for help. That voice belongs to Jamie, now 15 years old, and her body is discovered mutilated the next morning, Halloween 1995. Loomis knows that the nightmare has returned, and Michael Myers was back for round 6. Despite the fact that he's already on borrowed time, being in his mid-70s and having endured a handful of life-threatening scenarios, he just can't turn a cold shoulder to the city of Haddonfield. Even now, they still don't seem to have any respect for him despite all he's been through for them.
It's been quiet here for 6 years, and that's the way it's gonna stay. And the last thing I need now is you going around spouting off ghost stories.
Loomis quickly retorts that Michael Myers is his business. He's now a part of the legend of Michael Myers. The townspeople almost see him as synonymous with Michael, as if he's some kind of warning sign that the boogeyman is back. Loomis and Wynn go to the hospital to visit Jamie when he's approached by an even older familiar face. This is Tommy Doyle, the little boy that Laurie Strode was babysitting on that fateful Halloween night in 1978. Tommy starts to tell him about other relatives in the Strode family that are now living in Michael's old house, but he's rushed out of the hospital by security before he can tell the whole story. Tommy tells him to meet him at the campus rally at 9 that night, and Loomis knows that he'll have to prepare himself to face his old patient one last time. As per tradition, he pays a visit to Michael's old house, but its new residents aren't home when he arrives, so he just makes like a video game character and lets himself inside. Eventually, he meets the Strode matriarch, Deborah Strode, and warns her of his suspicion of Michael's immediate return. He urges her and her family to immediately leave town. When he gets back to the hospital, he learns that Jamie was off the previous night. He confronts Jamie's doctor, outraged and in a great amount of pain because of Jamie's passing. Remember, Jamie was essentially Dr. Loomis's greatest work. He was able to save her from becoming the next Michael Myers. The conversation does yield an interesting piece of information though. If there's some kind of a law about sharing a patient's medical information, the doctor ignores it and reveals that he found placental fluids in Jamie's body, meaning she had given birth about 24 hours before, only they did not know where the baby was. Loomis, on the other hand, thinks he does. He meets Tommy at the campus rally looking to talk further, but first they discover another Myers casualty, this time the body of radio personality Barry Sims. Loomis and Tommy return to the boarding house that Tommy's staying at across the street from the old Myers house, but they discover that the baby, which Tommy has named Steven, is now missing. There were also two other Strodes taking cover in Tommy's room, Kara Strode and her son Danny. These are the adoptive cousins of Laurie Strode, and they are also now missing, but they're soon discovered when Michael chases them to the front door and Tommy lets them in. Tommy asks Loomis who else knew about the baby Steven, which leads him to having a big realization.
Who else knew I had the baby?
No one.
No. There had to be someone else. Who knew?
Nobody knew it except me and...
They turn to the living room and see Danny sitting on the lap of the mysterious black trenchcoat man who helped free Michael in 1989, who turns out to be none other than the retiring Smiths Grove administrator, Dr. Terence Wynn. Loomis discovers that Wynn is part of an organization called the Cult of Thorn, who worships the demon Thorn, the same evil that possessed Michael Myers since 1963, and cannot leave his body until he kills the last remaining member of Michael's family. This explains Michael's entire life since that first dreaded Halloween, which was now 32 years ago. Dr. Loomis takes Tommy Doyle back to Smiths Grove one last time and asks Tommy to wait in the hall as he confronts Wynn, who invites him to join the Cult of Thorn. Loomis isn't having any of that though, and is prepared to shoot Dr. Wynn, but one of the cult members sneaks up on him and knocks him out. He wakes up around the time that Tommy has rescued Kara, Steven, and Danny Strode and helps them get away from Michael by shooting the controls for the door and hailing an elevator for Kara and the kids. Tommy catches up with them and invites Loomis to flee the hospital with them, but Loomis's decision goes back to the decision he made when all of this Cult of Thorn business began. He was happily retired when he discovered Michael's return in 1995, and he made the decision to come back to Haddonfield to try to stop Michael one last time. He knew he didn't have much gas left in the tank, and he was never planning on walking away with his own life. We never see exactly what his fate is, but his story ends on this shot, where Michael has shed his mask on the floor next to a syringe, and we hear Loomis cry out one final time before his story ends. I've always interpreted this ending to mean that Loomis eventually lost his life doing what he dedicated it to, trying to hunt down his most infamous psychiatric patient. Technically speaking, it's a very ambiguous ending. You could say that both of their fates at the end of this timeline will always be unknown. The reason for my interpretation has more to do with the context behind it. The original ending, known as the producer's cut, shows Loomis going back to Smiths Grove and discovering what he thinks is Michael, but turns out to be Dr. Wynn, with the iconic Michael Myers mask placed over his face, leaving the story open for another chapter. But sadly, the actor Donald Pleasance passed away shortly after filming, so the ending was reworked for the theatrical cut, which is technically canon and gives us more of a proper conclusion to Loomis's story. We see Dr. Samuel Loomis turn from a clinical psychologist treating mentally distressed children to a man obsessed with the destruction of one of his patients. While that doesn't sound like the most noble of characters on the surface, when you break him down, you discover that he puts the care of others first in his heart, and even before himself. He's a selfless man giving his time and his energy to protect the town of Haddonfield and the Strode family line, and he continues to do so even though none of the people he saves end up respecting him. His later years were corrupted by his growing obsession with stopping his adversary, which only worsened his reputation, but he kept on fighting right down to the very end. Let me know in the comments what Halloween character you'd like to see me cover next on Horror History. There are a ton of options. For example, the Rob Zombie timeline version of Dr. Loomis is a different character that I could analyze. That leaves us with like 4 Lauries, 4 Michaels, and probably 2 or 3 Tommies. We could be at this for a while, so let me know who you really want to see. You'll find all of those videos in the playlist on the left. Remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell for all notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.